Language and Power Podcast, Episode 5. In this podcast series, we look closely at the language being used in and around COP26. According to the official website, the COP26 summit will bring parties together to accelerate action towards the goals of the Paris Agreement and the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. Important stuff. Language is crucial to understanding the climate crisis problem, to formulating solutions, negotiating political and economic pitfalls. It's crucial to communicating science findings and recognizing the social, political, and economic conditions which have brought us to crisis point. Language is interaction that can accelerate action. But language is also performance, and performances can be used to distract from inaction, to avoid action, or postpone it. And language is what we focus on in this podcast series. Hello, I am Michael Farrelly. I teach English language at the University of Hull, and I research and write on issues of discourse, politics, policy and sustainability. And I'm joined as always by Tom Bartlett. Hi.
Hello, Michael. I'm Tom Bartlett. I teach language and linguistics at the University of Glasgow, and I'm currently sitting in my office looking over what is at present United Nations territory, right overlooking where COP is taking place before us.
Amazing, thank you. We are on as we record this on the 8th of November. It's adaptation, loss, and damage is the theme of the conference, and we've spoken about some of those previous episodes. This weekend we've seen protests, climate activists protests in Glasgow and cities across the world. And indeed, some scientists have been arrested, 27 of them, I understand, in a protest at Glasgow. So interesting visuals there. Before we go into the content of today, I just want to do some podcast housekeeping. So if you look at our website, webkeeping, on our website, languagepowerpodcast.org, you can now find ways to connect your podcatcher to our RSS feed. So people who know what that means will understand what I'm talking about. We also have links there if you are a user of Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or Stitcher. We've got links to all of those platforms as well. I'm sounding quite pro now, aren't I?
I have no idea what you're talking about, these.
We also have a form for people, anybody interested in receiving an email alert for when new episodes of this podcast series are out. There's a form there that you can fill in too. So today's theme, we're thinking about celebrity interventions in the COP26 media sphere. And we're going to look at a consortium of athletes, including Andy Murray, the tennis star, and to an intervention from the former Hollywood superstar, Arnold Schwarzenegger. Let's start with the sports consortium. We're going to read a report. We'll put a link into the actual video in the interview, but in the description of the podcast. But I'm just going to read out some of the reporting on this. So the headline, this is from BBC Online. The headline is Climate Change. Andy Murray and Tom Daley join call to COP26 delegates for climate action. This was from the 1st of November. And the story goes, Britain's Andy Murray and Tom Daley are among leading global sports figures joining forces to appeal for action to ensure a healthy and safe planet. Murray and Daley are two of more than 50 athletes representing 40 countries appealing to world leaders at the COP26 Climate Summit in Glasgow. Double Olympic sailing champion Hannah Mills and British rower Melissa Wilson have organised the campaign. And then it continues, and I'm just going to get down to some of the quotes. The video describes climate change as the race we need to win, and athletes are hoping the appeal will showcase the need for global powers to preserve and protect the planet. And then a quote from Mills, as athletes, we have a huge potential to be powerful advocates for the environment. Sport has a cultural and political influence. The platform athletes have and the support they receive from fans means we are in a position to communicate about what matters. That's part of the report. Tom, what do you think about the intervention in general of celebrities using the platform that they have in issues such as environmentalism and COP?
I think it's really interesting, isn't it? Because that quote at the end where the athlete is saying that we have this platform because we're athletes where we can talk about things like climate change. the two topics are not in the slightest bit connected. So the platform, the reason they've got the platform is because of what they've achieved in the sport, etc. And yet they feel that gives them a platform. Though she didn't say a right, she said a platform to speak about these things, and this is very true. People listen, but it's really interesting, isn't it? Because and these people speaking aren't experts in this field. They're stating their opinion, and they no doubt gain some support from their fans for this, which is great when you agree with the message, but really, really annoying when you don't agree with the message, and then you say, what are these sports stars doing coming up here and talking all this nonsense? So it's an interesting one. It's certainly true, as they say, that it creates they have this platform that creates support for certain things, but not with everybody, I suppose. And I wonder, but to the extent which we would, what do we think about it contributing to the overall message?
That's right. I mean, I see sports stars in other fields being criticised, being told by people, other people on Twitter, stick to what you know. This is a completely different. You're an expert on football or something. Just to stick to the topic, and sort of an annoyance. But as you said, when you agree with the point of view that the sports star is expressing, you're quite pleased with it. But conversely, and we've talked quite a bit this in the podcast series so far about Van Leuven's framework for understanding some of these issues from a language point of view, and he speaks about how various legitimation strategies. So how do you legitimize various standpoints? How do you get a legitimacy? And one of those is. Comes from some of that comes from authority of various sorts. So we can think about that. What authority does the sports star have? But also the legitimation that they get from being a role model, simply by being a sports star. And it seems to me that that's the side of that's the basis for their any legitimacy that they may have for intervening on this. It's simply that we often also criticize sports stars who do badly because they are setting an example in their role model function. So we can't have it both ways. We can't criticize them
for in society where sports stars maybe drink drive or do something like that, where there's something we say they are held up to a higher accountability. So we do expect that of them. So I suppose this is the converse of that.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. And in this case, we were talking about this before we started. That in this case, the sports stars are only associated with their sporting prowess. The ones that are listed in this article, they are taking their authority from that role model platform, so that is interesting. Later on, we'll get into a more complex case in terms of Arnold Schwarzenegger. But what about the things that these sports stars say? I picked out a particular one, so I'll maybe start with that. We noticed that one of the things that we keep coming back to throughout this series are these metaphors about how we're thinking about climate change. And I read out the video describes climate change as the race we need to win. And so that metaphor there as thinking about our relation with climate change as something like a race, there's a metaphor for how we, at least the people who are speaking in this video, are describing climate change. And I thought it was really interesting that for people who listened to a previous episode, we had a metaphor of Boris Johnson talking about the relation to climate change being like a football match. And we were saying that wondering whether it was helpful to think about this division of people and versus climate change in this sporting metaphor. Now, this is very similar, because if you're racing, who are you racing? It sounds like this is being thought of in terms of humanity racing against climate change. And it does the same thing. It externalizes the effect, which is climate change, from the actions of humanity. There's a separation there, and again, it's an exciting metaphor if it helps people to get on board with the idea of tackling climate change. I mean, there's another sporting metaphor.
I was just thinking that,
but if it helps us to start taking action, then fair enough. But there's something that bothers me under all of this, which is that it's, I talked about a desk the other day, but let me think about something else. If I was hurting myself by scratching myself too much, I wouldn't then sort of go to war on or have a race against, the pain on my arm. I would just stop doing it. And I tend to think about climate change in that way. Human actions are causing climate change. So it's no good thinking about the cause as being something external and opposite to us. We are the cause. We don't want to fight the consequences so much as the cause. That's the kind of metaphor I think we need to develop to help our thinking about what are we supposed to do about it. What do you think, Tom?
No, I agree with you. I think this one's slightly better than Johnson's one about being 5-1 down at half time, because I suppose they both make references to time, but
true.
Johnson's is a bit more oblique, whereas this one at least is saying it's a race, and therefore at least the idea of urgency is being put forward, which sometimes we sort of miss. But I agree with you. It's still a question. Let's try harder doing the same thing, rather than actually changing everything or stopping at the root cause, rather than working harder on scratching it or tidying the desk or any of those other metaphors that you introduced yourself. The whole thing.
I mean, but this is not to, as we just said, these people are not, they're not spending the whole time thinking about it. This isn't to criticize them directly. It's just because this, and what I'm saying is this type of metaphor is pervasive. These are the metaphors by which we think about climate change, and I think you pick up what other people are saying, and I think perhaps. Collectively, we need to think about metaphors that will describe the situation in a more efficacious way.
And I think we were talking about this, even though sometimes, very often it annoys us if people who are well known in one sphere make pronouncements in another sphere. At the same time, there's some sort of reflection of this. How many people will it affect? How many? Andy Murray fans or whatever will become environmentalists, because there's not really many, I suppose, unless they were, very probably borderline anyway. But it's with all this idea of just the general noise around climate change. It's not just the scientists talking about it anymore. It's going out much more into the public sphere. It's something that's out there. There's a general noise, and most of the noise, I would say, is moving towards doing something about climate change rather than just ignoring it. And at least that's something, not every message might be exactly what we want, or might be very scientific or anything else, but just shows this background noise that makes it seem less radical, less kooky, less crazy to be environmentalist. I have to think about the jokes about people saving the whale 20 years ago, 30 years ago, when we were young, Michael. They were crazy hippies, whereas now it's much more mainstream. You've got people out there, so at least it's raising this noise, general feeling, which is great. And I think
I agree. I think rather than seeing this as should these sports stars be commenting, it's the effect is a background noise, as you say, and that will have the effect of mainstreaming these issues and drawing attention to what the scientists have been saying for decades and decades and decades. Whether or not individual fans are then convinced to change their mind, is slightly beside the point. It's this general background noise that more and more people are demanding that the decision makers really do make decisions that are effective.
And again, if there's 100,000 on the street in Glasgow on Saturday, or 50,000, the police report's always roughly half the count of the organisers' report of how many people were there, so we can assume it's somewhere in the middle. That's a lot of people. Again, a lot of people complaining they were blocking the roads, etc., but it's a lot of noise, it's a lot of mainstreaming of the message, a lot of people taking up the message and again getting it out there, not to universal support, but just an increasing volume. Really interesting.
Should we go on to Arnold Schwarzenegger? So Hollywood. A similar intervention.
Similar, but very different as well, because where the sports stars were more like the celebrities saying, buy this car because I've got one, which is, the weakest form of role model. Just, I want to be like that person, I'll buy a car like him. Whereas Arnold Schwarzenegger, of course, he comes out and he gives this interview to the BBC, and we'll put the link up for that. We can't play it obviously because it's a BBC interview, but we'll put the link up, and it's worth listening to. And he comes out in a very macho stance. From the very beginning, he talks about being aggressive towards climate change. He talks about politicians not having the balls to do things. So he's taking this undiplomatic language, this aggressive language, this powerful language. And let's remember, he was first famous for being Mr. Universe. And after that, he became a film star on the back of it, most famous for being a film star on the Terminator in particular, but now also as a politician, as the governor of California, the governator, as he sometimes likes to be called. Again, the whole idea of the governator suggesting he's going to be a governor in a really physical, raw, aggressive sense rather than the normal sort of mild governor. And I think this is interesting. So he's got that role model thing, but when we were talking about selling a message earlier, he's making the point here that being ecological is not necessarily for snowflakes or for hippies or for lefties. He's a Republican governor, and he's there speaking, and he makes a big play on this. He very much does that. So uses all these different, what we can call cultural capitals, the kudos he carries with him as a film star, as a bodybuilder, and as a politician, and he makes reference to them all in different ways. So he's able to sell this message in a very specific way that is, again, a very different voice. I said I would liken him to Chai Suri. And in a way, what the messages he makes is, we've got to make this message down to earth. We've got to make this message that people understand. And he criticizes environmentalists for talking about facts and figures and this and that, and stuff that people aren't interested in, people don't understand. And he says, we've got to do it in this way. Don't buy your jeans that are imported from China, because it wastes a lot of money. So the same way, he's sort of, just like Chai Suri, he's making a message that relates to the daily lives of everyday people, but in a very different way. He's very far from, the sort of person that she represents, the normal audience that would be listening to her. And again, he says, I can say this because I'm a politician. I'm a Republican politician. He actually makes the point that Republicans will listen to him. They trust him because they don't think he's trying to subvert the economy or bring down global capitalism. He says we need smart capitalism, we need good capitalism. So he makes the point himself that he can speak to people that other people can't, while also criticizing environmentalists for not being on message, for not being able to communicate exactly what we're talking about here. Again, so it's a very different voice to Chai Suri. It's a very different voice from many other people we've looked at. But again, we've talked very often about the more voices you have and the more positions you have, you get a broader constituency, you get a richer message developing.
Yeah, that's interesting. He talks about smart competition as being the way. So he's attacking both environmentalists for not getting their message out clearly, but he's also attacking, I think you mentioned it, but he talks about people who, fellow business people, leaders, economic leaders, as being stupid or liars. So he's attacking on two different constituents, but hopefully,
and very macho language again. Very macho. Liars. Not many people would get away with that.
Not really. No, not really. And he does it by, he's also, he takes symbols of a certain type of person. These huge military style off-road vehicles, these Hummers. That I remember years ago being heavily criticised for being very fuel inefficient, and but there were the choice of some celebrities in Hollywood. He's kept his, apparently, according to this, but he's switched it from being diesel to battery powered, and he justifies that or legitimizes that decision by saying the electric version goes faster and it's got more horsepower, so it's more, faster, better. It's taking that discourse of these kind of why people like these big power hungry cars, or some people do, and saying, well, actually, the greener version is better, or the battery-powered version is even more faster and more powerful than the sort of traditional.
And he says the same about himself, doesn't he, with his new diet?
With his new diet, so he talks about eating less meat. So he talks about going down, cutting his meat eating by 3/4 over the last few years. And he says, so this is a quote: "Since eating more vegetables and plant-based foods, my heart doctor said my arteries have stopped narrowing." And then the reason he's saying this is to set up an opposition with people who are saying, well, going green means you have to give up something. And some people would respond to that saying, I don't want to give up anything. Why should I? Other people answer, why should I? But what he's coming back at that and saying is, well, how have I given up something? I gained my health. It gave me an extra 2 years. So he's sort of switching that. Well, I've lost. I am getting rid of eating as much meat, but that you shouldn't think of that as being losing something. You should see that you get the compensation of getting better health. So in a way, it's not quite right. You are. I mean, for a hardened meat eater, you would be giving something up if you ate less. That's the nature of it. That's the point of it, is to give up and eat less. But he's saying, well, you've got this alternative, and I think quite cleverly puts this alternative. You're also gaining something, and that's important. And I think actually a message that we've seen more and more of about the kind of seeing adaptation in a positive way. How that pans out, we'll have to see.
No, and it's great that he of all people can talk about a diet being good and then keeping you strong and healthy.
That's
and
right.
I think it's really interesting to think about his constituency, who this message might be appealing to. And if you think of the split in republicanism in the States at the moment, where you've got the Donald Trump camp with his very, very macho, aggressive, I'm not interested in this, liberal discourse. And almost you see the merchandise and stuff at Trump rallies is mocking the fact that people will carry on smoking. They're not going to wear masks. They're going to carry on burning fuel. It's as if to say, in your face, liberal world, we are who we are. Whereas Schwarzenegger is very clever. He's aiming at that same audience and saying, look, you don't need to be so, you can have the best of both worlds.
Yeah.
And it might not be quite true, but it's very important to have someone there trying to win that audience over, because I couldn't do it, you can't do it, Trisha can't do it, Greta certainly can't do it. So you need to have Arnie in there, even if we don't agree with the whole of his message necessarily. He's there winning over a particular audience. So he's telling it in a certain way. And again, this is where he when he talks about how he's communicating, he actually reflects on how he's communicating it, and he compares it to making a film and talking about a film. So again, drawing on this third area of expertise he's got, he says, when you're describing a film, you don't talk about how many meters of film you used, what lighting you used, what calibration you used. You talk about the storyline. You make it straightforward. So again, he knows about the films. Again, he makes a nice relation to that, criticizes the scientists who go on about facts and figures and tonnage of carbon into the atmosphere, and says, tell the story, bring it down to earth, tell the story. And manages also to get a little dig in at China there as well, where let's not export our genes from China, boost the local market instead. So staying very on strong for Republican local market, US first market message, but very, very different from Trump's message, and hopefully winning some of that constituency over to at least thinking it's not the end of the world to think about the environment.
Yeah, I did want us to. I mean, I don't know if we're sounding a lot like fans of Arnold Schwarzenegger, but as a criticism, he talks about buying local products. Every time you buy something from overseas, that's evil for the environment. So it follows on from your China thing. This is the worst thing you can do. And in a sense, I'm very much for buying local products. I would try and do that, but this individualized response, it's great if you've got a local market or a shop that sells stocks local products. But if you live in a place where the only shop you've got access to is a large supermarket, then it's out of your hands.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's in the hands of the product buyers, the supply chain people. It's all about it's about what other people do. So I always think that as part of these discourses, we've got to. Yes, it is in part about the end consumer and what we do, but there are consumers all along the supply chain, and they need to have the pressure to resist buying environmentally friendly things to stock and sell people. So
yeah. I don't think this individual responsibility message is very helpful, and I wonder if we can return to that. Yeah. I know for myself, I'm against short distance aeroplane flights. Yeah, I took 600 flights backwards and forwards between Scotland and Cardiff while I was working there. We all make excuses. I did it because I needed a job. Yeah, I would have voted for someone to stop me being able to do that. But while the opportunity's there, as individuals, we don't take it on. And I think this idea that we've got to change individual behaviour. Possibly we need to look at that a bit more and think, we just don't do it. We make excuses. And I don't know if that's does that lead us on to the sound bite of the day then, Michael?
Well, there was one more thing that we wanted to say, because this is about intertextuality and how Schwarzenegger again pushes the image, goes back to his iconic film role. He ends this interview by saying, "Oh yes, there is no fate but what we make for ourselves," and that's a line from Terminator, where one of the characters there describes how don't give up. Time. For people who don't know, it's all about time travel and sending people back to defeat the enemy before it starts. And not feeling that kind of pessimistic and fatalistic view that because you've seen a particular future, doesn't mean that it's inevitable that it happens. So he's kind of nicely used that line from his iconic film to sort of talk about climate change. So, which does lead into our next soundbite of the day.
I segued a bit too soon then. And so the soundbite I'm going to take today is, I'm going to leave it anonymous because it's said by a member of the public. It's been said by many, many members of the public, but I heard it today when people were talking about being able to fly to the States again, and whether that was a good thing or not in terms of post-COVID, we can fly to the States again, but should we be rethinking our behaviors in terms of the climate? And so the quote that I heard, but I've heard many versions of, is, if the politicians are all flying in their gas-guzzling jets, they can't expect us to change our behaviors. And I think this is great, because it's just this typical thing of, if we've got any excuse not to change our behaviors, we'll jump on it. If we can justify it in any way, it makes it that much easier for us to carry on doing bad stuff. But it's also then this idea of the role model. But now, instead of the role model for positive behavior, we're saying, well, if our role models are failing, then there's interestingly, it doesn't say there's no obligation on us to do it, or we shouldn't do it, or we shouldn't change our behaviors. It said they can't expect us to change our behaviors. It's this weird sort of passing on of responsibility in terms of what the politicians can expect of us, rather than what we should do, what would be good for the environment. And it's saying, well, if our role models fail, so we can fail as well. And it's just, I think we see this time and time again. It's, if people can give us a reason to opt out. In my case, I needed a job in Cardiff. Maybe that was a good excuse, but it still meant I had to call these flights. In this case, well, the politicians aren't doing it, so I don't need to do it. And I think we see that quite a lot in terms of just finding a let out for your own behaviour, for your own individual behaviour.
And that is the issue. That is the problem with this general discourse, that it's down to individual choices in the end, because we cannot make individual choices that add up to the kind of mass action that we require at this point. So
no, it doesn't add up, does it?
Yeah.
And while we're on the question of giving people a way out of stuff and not having to live up to expectations, I'm just going to go back to a tweet which is not really in any way a soundbite of the day, because it came from some time ago, but it's very relevant for this. And it's a tweet from Donald Trump. It's actually a very, very famous tweet. The year is 2012, in which Donald Trump famously tweeted, "The concept of global warming was created by and for the Chinese in order to make US manufacturing non-competitive." And so he's just come out with this idea that global warming is a myth, and he's sort of prevaricated on whether he still believed that or whether he was joking at last thing. But enough people believe him as a role model to say global warming isn't true. We still get people, in terms of making noise, making negative noise. Enough scientists are quoting enough random scientists, and our scientists out there who don't really believe in global warming. But if you amplify that noise, you try and take away from the people who do follow it. And this is what Trump's doing. We've got an excuse. Again, China is always the scapegoat, often the scapegoat in these cases. Not to say that China's behavior is good or bad, but it's often used. And that, it's a myth, it's propaganda. And we know there's quite problems with propaganda coming from other continents. And so we don't need to believe climate change. As long as we throw enough suspicion on it, we don't need to take it seriously. And again, that global manufacturing. If you are in the Rust Belt or any area that relies on global manufacturing, this is your to carry on with those jobs. Why those jobs have to stay? It's not time to get rid of those jobs yet because it's all a hoax.
Yeah. I mean, even if you don't believe it, even if you sort of realize that, well, like, of course, that doesn't sound right that China invented it. I mean, it gives you, it makes it less serious.
Yeah.
You're kind of given license to not take it as the most important thing that on your agenda. Yes. So yeah. So impressive. Well, not so impressive. Impressive interventions by the celebrities, and then some not so impressive ones by other people. Right.
Celebrities are the Marmite of the intervention.
Yes. That's one for the UK listeners.
From our worldwide audience,
Yeah. Right. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for listening. We will be back tomorrow, and during the week, we're going to hopefully get some additional people in for a couple of interviews. So that would be good. So we look forward to that. And Tom, I'll see you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow, Michael.
Bye.